Fan service.
Yes.
Fan service. Anyone who's watched anime has heard of it before.
Why did
We
they
all know
recommend
what it
me
is.
this?
If you clicked on this video just because the thumbnail had boobs in it, you've probably seen it before.
They
Because you're a
recommended
degenerate.
this to
Using
me.
just the basic definition of the term, fan service is anything included in a work of fiction
I wonder why.
solely to try and please
My
the audience,
favorite.
specifically without contributing anything to the plot or media other than making the fans happy. Now, there are many different ways this can show up. It would be
Manager
impossible
son
for you to have
recommended
consumed
this to
media
me,
before
so
without seeing
we're gonna
some
watch
form
it
of
and
fan
see
service.
what's about.
It might be a cameo or reference in a movie, a character getting more screen time because of their popularity, a gratuitous action scene, or a horror movie with tons of gore. Even an encore at a concert would broadly be considered fan service. But by far, the most common form of fan service is the sexual kind. And I would say,
Boobs!
even more specifically, the
Yeah.
anime kind. Because while
I
the
can do
term
that
still
too.
has that broader definition, most of the time you'll hear the words fan service.
So
it'll
we
be
can
in
blame
reference
this
to
on
an
Manager
anime with
Son.
tons
Yes,
of lewd
you can
imagery,
blame this on
skimpy
Manager
outfits,
Son.
bouncing breasts,
Oh!
panty shots, wardrobe malfunctions. How does that even happen?
Oh.
While media outside of anime and manga still include tons of sexual content, from shirtless dudes to bikini-clad women to the entire male cast of Game of Thrones penises, most of the time anime is still the only place you'll hear that sexualization referred to as fan service. And this is all widely regarded as a negative to the medium. Many people hate it unconditionally, and most people have some complicated
Wardrobe
opinion about
malfunction
it,
for
as you
Apollo
can even
win?
see from
Never.
this poll I ran on my channel.
Let's
The
see.
term itself is negative and often used as a criticism of a piece of media. Oh, I liked this show, but it has too much fan service in it. So let's take a deep dive into the world of fan service. Where did it come from? Why is it so common despite being hated? And is there such
Is it
thing
really
as
hated?
good fan service?
Is it really?
Also, it should go without saying
mean,
that this video will have tons of
is
sexy
it really
anime girls
hated?
and even a few guys. So if you're not into that sort of thing, or you're my dad, then I might suggest clicking off the video now.
I'm just gonna say this right now. If Manager Son is trying to take me off, I'm coming after you. History of fan service. Ooh, I
Now,
love
to cover
this.
why fan service is so common, or at least my best guess, what better place to start than its history? After all, it wouldn't be
The
a
person
Lectorious
talking,
video
he's
without
kinda
an
cute.
unnecessary amount of research. And as
I
it
love
turns
the
out,
way he
first
smiles.
recorded piece of media meant to pander to the audience with sex
Fan
is a
service is
French
beautiful.
film named
Exactly.
Menina La Fille Sans Voix, or
Oh,
Menina the Girl Without
giant
Sails.
woman!
I hope I got that pronunciation
I
right.
want a
only
giant
took
woman
French
in my
school
life.
for like 9 years.
Why is that so
the
hard
film
to have?
featured the character of Menina, a woman in a bikini, which at the time of release in 1952 was considered very risque for American audiences. And so, when the
Ooh.
movie was released in America, it was of course renamed to Menina, the Girl in the Bikini, even though Menina
Okay.
does not show up or wear a bikini until almost 2/3 of the way through the film. And none of this has anything to do with
Damn,
anime. I just
that
think it's
boob jiggle.
really
Did you see
interesting to
that?
talk about
It was
because the
right there.
sexualization of women to
Neurons
pander
are
to a male
activating,
audience has existed
literally.
for such a long time, entirely
Literally.
separate to the anime community. But the first ever anime to include pandering of the sexual variety was a little series called Cutie Honey.
Cutie honey? Wait.
Cutie Honey was a magical
Oh!
girl shown in manga originally created in 1973 by
Hey,
Joe
yo!
Nagai. It featured the titular character, Honey Kisaragi, having to transform from a Catholic schoolgirl into a magical superhero to defeat villains and save the world. The sexual element of the story then comes from Cutie
Oh!
Honey's design being a busty anime girl, as well as the fact that she loses all her clothes for part of her
Oh my
transformation. This brief nudity, as well as most
God!
of the show's plot, actually came from a retooling early in development, where it was
I
originally
wish that happened to
intended
me
as a
when I
shoujo
transformed.
series, meaning meant for girls, before they failed to make the time
Except,
slot. and
like,
had to
Sailor
change
Moon
into a
kinda
shonen
thing.
Series,
I don't want
meaning
my
meant
clothes
for
to be
boys,
off.
to be aired. The shoujo version of the series didn't actually contain any PG material, but with the change in audience, the show's creator decided to add nudity and more violence
mouse
in order
fell.
to pander to the male audience. And thus, fan service in anime was born. And fun fact, Cutie Honey is credited as the first shonen anime with a female protagonist. So, girl power, I guess. Though Cutie Honey did end up becoming a very popular franchise. Through the years, the show had
Oh
its
my
original
gosh,
anime
she's
spawn
super
tons of
cute.
spin-offs and
I
sequels,
lo- Oh!
including a live-action movie and tie-in show directed by Hideaki Anno.
I
creator
mean,
of
I
Neon Genesis
love the
Evangelion.
animation.
And let's actually talk
So
about
she is
Anno
the
for a
original
second,
magical
because
girl?
he
I
is
guess,
a
yeah.
key piece in the history of fan service. While anime and manga, especially in the magical girl genre, followed in the footsteps of Cutie Honey, pursuing more and more overt nudity and sexualization, it was actually Anno's studio Gainax that further pushed the envelope. Because
well, we know what
Gainax
Apollo's
was
doing
officially
after
created
stream.
in 1984,
And what
the
is that?
founders actually started off creating fan
You already know
films
what
for
I'm
the
doing
Japanese
after
sci-fi
stream?
convention Daikon in 1981.
I mean, I'm drawing.
Their
Yeah.
studio was originally called Daikon Film, and the
Hello,
first
Bubby.
animations they
Hi.
premiered were called Daikon 3 and 4, named after the third and fourth convention they premiered at. The fan films are what you would expect of an animation group formed entirely of college students attending a sci-fi convention, featuring everything from a mech battle between Macross characters
I know
and
that.
Godzilla
A
to a
Gundam,
lightsaber fight
right?
between an anime
Gundam?
girl and
I
Darth
think I said
Vader,
that correctly.
all to the soundtrack of one of the James Bond films, as well as an electric
Bunny girl
light
outfits
orchestra
are
song.
supreme.
More important than the blatant copyright infringement, however, was Daikon 4's appropriation of the Playboy bunny suit on its main character, as this was a very skimpy outfit at the time, which would go on to be a staple of sexy anime girls everywhere. And once Gainax
the animation
officially
is
formed
so
from the members
lovely
of
there.
Daikon Film, they would take the sexualization to all of their future works. The first major influence of Gainax was actually Hideaki Anno's directorial debut, Gunbuster, in 1988.
Gunbuster.
The mecha anime was an OVA, meaning it didn't air on television, and was thus allowed to show more nudity and adult themes. Primarily through its multiple bathing scenes and ridiculous jiggling. The jiggle was actually so prominent in Gunbuster that it inspired the term Gainaxing or Gainax bounce in order to describe over-the-top anime boob bouncing,
I can do that.
typically with each breast moving independently of one another.
Boing.
And that proclivity for skimpy outfits, casual
I can do the
nudity,
same
and
thing.
absurd
Sheesh.
breast physics carried over from Gunbuster into anime as a whole. Now, I don't think Gainax was solely responsible for the popularity of fan service, the same way I don't think Cutie Honey was, but considering they had an entire term invented to describe how they animated breasts, it's pretty obvious they had a major effect. No effect so major as possibly coining the term, though. Yes, that's right. On top of pioneering anime bunny girls and bouncing anime
love
boobs,
bunny girls.
the first usage of the term fan service to describe sexual pandering was in 1991's Otaku no Video, produced by none other than Gainax themselves.
Ooh.
Now, I will say it is highly unlikely to be the
So much
actual
research was
invention
put
of
into
the
this, and I
term,
really
because for as
appreciate
much
that,
research as I
like-
did online, I can't seem to find that
I
information
love that.
anywhere. But Gainax's parody anime
Ooh.
on Otaku culture
Wow, look
and
at
their
the
own studio's
animation.
founding does use the term fan service to describe sexual scenes
Yeah,
that pander to
look
the
at her.
audience
She's a cute.
before any other mention of it online or in media. So what I think is most likely is
That
the term was
dude.
unofficially
I'm in love with
coined
him.
somewhere in the Japanese otaku space in the late 80s, possibly even referring to Gainax's work
Oh.
like Gunbuster, and then Otaku no Video is definitely what cemented it in pop culture. Because it's
Love
only
it!
after 1991 that
Love
the term
it! I
gained
love it! I love it! I
widespread
love it!
appeal. Early internet users began
Look at the
adopting it,
detail of
the
that back
definition
there.
of the term became broadly
Dude.
known, and in 1995, with the release of Neon
That's
Genesis
my man.
Evangelion,
Left side.
Gainax themselves were once again using the term, with some of the characters in the show even promising more fan service in the previews for next week's episode.
Ooh.
Which is incredibly funny when you consider just how critically acclaimed Evangelion is.
Apollo's
that
taste
this
in men is
deep
concerning. You
exploration
don't
of
ever gotta
trauma,
worry about
religion, and
that.
the human psyche started off as a mech show with girls in latex suits made by the Jiggling Boobs guys.
Jiggly. Oh. 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 I never seen that anime. I
And it's
wanna.
by the mid-90s that fan service just became an
I wish I
integral part
did.
of anime as
I need
a
to
whole,
see it.
an inseparable part of the culture that exists and thrives to this day. So here is where I'll break away from the timeline a bit to explore the question of
You know,
why.
that
Why
meme
is fan service so
with the
popular? Why did it
Evangeline-
continue to grow from
Evangeline,
1998
you
to
know?
where it is today?
Kono honey, you're back.
割と難易度高いんだってだから五条くんがしてよ
All right, next question. I mean, shonen is by far the most popular genre of anime to exist, and it literally just translates to boys comic. Its only defining trait is that it's a genre made for teenage boys, and what could they love more than boobs? Well, how about today's sponsor, NordVPN? I'm just kidding. Nobody sponsored me yet.
Aww.
That would have been a sick transition, though. Ever since the Cutie Honey anime transitioned from a shoujo
I'll
time
sponsor
slot to a
you.
shonen
Let me
time
be
slot
on your
and
show.
decided that nude power-ups would be exciting, it was game over. If your primary market is teenage boys, of course you're going to push the envelope into softcore porn territory as hard and fast as possible. It's literally free money, especially when the majority of Japan's young men are overworked and single, with 50% of Japanese males at age 20 saying they never had a girlfriend.
I'll be your
Needless to say, there
girlfriend.
is a
I'll be your
massive audience
parasocial
in Japan
girlfriend.
of young men
You and
who
I
desire sexual content,
will be together
and
forever.
animation studios are more than
Thank you so
willing
much
to
for the
cater to them.
raid,
And that might be the biggest
Steam_Raptor.
reason why
Thank you, thank you.
fanservice is so
Greetings,
prominent in
greetings to
anime.
you, honey.
While a lot of countries are just as open about sexuality and nudity in
Welcome,
television,
welcome.
very few have the specific lonely male youth problem that Japan has. Plus, countries like the US are just
Hi,
so
hello,
incredibly
welcome,
behind when
welcome.
it
I'm
comes
doing
to
very
openness
lovely.
for
We're reacting to
sexual
some
content.
YouTube
We've
videos
got
right
things
now
like
at the
the Hays
moment.
Code from 1934 to 1967, which banned nudity, suggestive clothing, and
You
scenes
cannot
of
ban
passion
the lewd.
not integral to the plot,
You cannot
as well as massive pressure
sustain
from
me.
religious groups to boycott any media that didn't uphold those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely. That's such a fucking stupid line. I hate that line. Which all leads to America being effectively 30 years behind every other country when it comes to sexual content and is still struggling to catch up. This is a large reason why cartoons in the West still market themselves towards children, whereas anime in Japan markets to 15 to 25-year-olds and has no problem showing them titties. And so that whole long section is the history of fan service, or at least everything I know about it and think is interesting. But we still haven't covered why it's so controversial. I mean, it can't just be a case
Because
of
they don't want to
indecency,
see
because a lot
titties
of anime
in
fans are, in
underwear
fact,
all the time.
incredibly
That's
horny.
why.
I myself love big anime titties. And
I
ripped
love big
dudes.
titties.
They're fantastic. But the problem lies
Big
more in
titties.
how that
We love
sexuality
big
is
titties.
executed within the show.
I mean, if
Referring
they're
back to
done
the poll I ran, only
appropriately
2% of people
well-mannered,
enjoyed fan
yes.
service in all circumstances. 35% enjoyed it when it fit the show or wasn't intrusive.
Honestly,
and
I'm good.
23%
Yeah, I
enjoyed
like
in
it when it
select
fits
shows.
into the
So a
story
combined
pretty well in
58%
certain
majority
scenes.
of
That's all I'm
people
gonna
said that
say.
they enjoyed
Wait until
fan
you hear
service
about
in
the
select
male
shows,
Japanese corn
typically
star
when it wasn't
situation.
intrusive. The
I love
problem
big
then is
anime
the shows
booba.
where it
Booba,
is
booba, booba,
intrusive,
booba,
where
booba,
only
booba.
2% of people said that
Booba,
they
booba,
still
booba,
enjoyed it.
booba, booba.
So what is intrusive fan service? Well, to answer that question, I want to talk about an anime I just recently finished watching.
Like
It's
High
called
School
Fire
DxD.
Force,
I love
and
High School
anyone who's seen that
DxD.
show
I still do
immediately
to
knows
this
where I'm
day.
going with this.
Na, 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 na.
Fire Force is a great show.
Okay,
It's a
I've
shonen
never
anime
seen
about
it,
a
but
world
I've
where
seen some
people
clips here and there, and
spontaneously
it's
turn into
definitely
demons,
one
and
of the
a
most
special team of
fan
firefighters with
servicey stuff that
pyrokinesis are
I've
tasked with
seen
taking them
from
out. There is a
from
lot more
it.
than that, including a group of villains they fight, but for the most part, it's cool
It
action
has
scenes
good
between people with
plot
fire
and
powers.
good
It's also
plot.
animated by David Productions, the people who make JoJo, and carries over some of the insanely cool sound design they use for that show.
Oh.
使わせてもらうぜ。
Whoa!
However, there is a character in
That
Fire
reminds me whenever I'm about to do a supernova, that's the sound effect that it's gonna happen. Like
Air Force called Tamaki. She's pretty
Hello,
cool. She's got
thank you so
fire
much for
cat
following,
powers, and
honey.
It took me 6 episodes to realize that her and another character just named Maki were 2 different people. But far and away, the most important thing about Tamaki to both this video and her inclusion in the show is that she has a special ability called the Lucky Lecher Lure, which I believe is meant to be a play on
What?
words in Japanese that got roughly translated into English and basically means lucky pervert syndrome. In other words, she has a canonical power in the show, acknowledged by other characters, that puts her into lewd situations through bad luck. Here's an example of that.
ちょっとだけでいいんです。
In almost every episode of the show, Tamaki will slip and fall and have her boob fall into a character's hand, or all of her clothes fly off, or something equally
Oh my
perverted.
God,
It is
what?
honestly insane how
I
much
haven't
the show
seen
is willing
a
to
lot of the
bend
clips from
reality
that.
in order to have someone accidentally
How does that even
molest
happen?
this
Ah!
girl. And on the surface, her superpower is just a bit annoying, but it isn't critically negative to the anime. Fire Force is already an incredibly horny show and is willing to put every character in the nude at some point. Like, you remember Maki, that girl I talked about confusing Tamaki with? She's ripped. Oh, and what about the nun, Iris? Yes, they have a nun on the team. Surely nothing bad would ever happen.
Okay.
Oh my god. I mean, what about a character who...
Okay. Hell yes.
only defining trait is that they are fully clothed head to
Buff
toe.
mommy.
I mean,
Buff
you
mommy.
can't even see her face with this thing up.
Oh!
What the fuck? The show even has a nude firefighter calendar episode just as an excuse to get all the characters naked. Oh, and I don't
just
even
an
mean
excuse
the girls.
to get them.
It's the boys this time.
Oh!
The entirety of Fire Force is just horror, which is totally fine because that's just the tone of the show. But what does become a problem at some point is Tamaki, because she is sexualized to such a degree that the fan service becomes her only defining character trait. Not only does she get into unfortunate situations in every episode for no other reason than to give the audience a boner, but the fan service actively interferes with the plot and her character. Now, I'll try not to spoil anything, but Tamaki at some point ends up getting ambushed and beat up trying to protect some kids. She's not the best fighter and almost gets beat to death by a character she previously trusted, leaving her a bruised mess in the ground who our main character Shinra has to save. Tamaki looks up at Shinra, crying, begging him to save her because she's so emotionally overwhelmed at what's happening. He steps up like the hero he is and begins fighting the bad guy, and then this happens.
Oh! You ruined it! What?
Alright, well that just deflated every ounce of tension in the scene.
Why?
That's not even where it ends.
No!
Dude, what the fuck? What am I supposed to be feeling right now? Seriously. Because when you strategically burn all of her clothes off and have her do her cute little cat pose, I legitimately think you want me to feel horny looking at a character who was almost just beaten to death. And Tamaki continues
Why
to
are you
be
doing
in
this to me? Why are you doing these feelings to me?
She even gives Shinra a serious emotional speech while looking like this. Again, do you want me to take this seriously? Because remove the sexualization from this scene and it's one of the most emotional in the show. The tonal whiplash is just hurting my head at this point. And while this scene in particular is the worst offender, Tamaki's entire character throughout the whole show continues to be like this. She doesn't win any serious fights. She doesn't have any big redeeming moments. She loses and gets beat up and saved by one of the big, strong male characters over
This brings
and
up my
over
point
again.
of I appreciate fan service when done right.
Entire
Honestly,
seasons
yes.
to even begin developing her character or suggest that she should be taken seriously. And even at the end of her first training, with all this music swelling and emotion building as she starts to be a competent character, her dumb pervert ability kicks in and deflates the whole scene again.
Oh, I love eyes like that. Oh.
Tamaki is the textbook definition of a fan service character.
No.
Her whole reason for existing within the show is a vehicle for sex jokes and horny moments. That's it. Any contribution to the plot or action she has is undermined by her sexualization. Except for one scene of hers, one Tamaki.
He is hot for real.
Moment
I love eyes
that
like
might
that,
be the best
though.
moment in the whole show,
He
including
is
the time a
hot.
guy deflected a nuclear bomb.
What? You can't deflect me. I'm too amazing. Oh.
So to set up some context,
Deflecting
the
it
bad guys
back
in
at me,
Fire
I
Force
just
also
deflect
have
it back.
firepower. Big shock, I know. And during a confrontation against these bad guys in season 1, Tamaki and the nun Iris end up against a guy named Assault. Please don't ask why there's nuns in this show. You already know the answer to that. Assault is hyped up beforehand.
But
and
why
shown
is
to be
his
an
name
incredibly
Assault?
Powerful character.
Can I
He
ask
attacks
about
the
that?
girls, nearly kills them, and then this happens.
Oh.
As it turns out, Assault is a virgin, and even touching a girl just completely debilitates him. Which
Oh my god, wait, what?
Advantage, they just beat him to death with a lead pipe.
Beat his ass! Beat his ass! Beat his ass!
It's a great subversion of tropes, an
Hell
incredibly
yeah.
funny scene, and it's not even the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because much later, near the end of season 2, Assault recovers from having his brains bashed out and challenges Tamaki to a rematch. And the show goes through his training arc, where he locks himself inside his room and
Hi,
watches
Apollo,
porn
and I am
for
new
a
here.
month
Hello, honey.
straight in order
Welcome,
to get
welcome,
over
Mark.
his incredible horniness. They then have their rematch, and this happens.
Oh my god!
That is amazing. I love how they went 110% on the sound design of Tamaki falling like that.
God.
It's probably the single funniest shot in the whole show.
Oh
Assault
my
just fucking passes out
god!
after it.
What?
This, to me, is what the fan service in Fire Force could be. It's funny, tonally consistent, and contributes to the plot of the
Okay,
show.
that
If
that
all of
did
the
make
major
me
fan service
laugh a
moments were
little.
saved for scenes like this, I would love it. But they end up spilling out into the serious moments of the show and clashing way too hard to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
指一本で私の矢を止めると
Ooh.
腕は全く鈍っていないか
修行は完成した。もう負ける要素がない。
In the bigger picture, I don't think fan service itself is bad. While some people might object to it just on the basis of being too lewd, that isn't really the
my
problem. I mean, if you're not okay seeing boobs in a show where a villain literally explodes a guy,
Bro's
that
fighting
seems like a
demons.
you problem.
He's fighting
Fan
for his
service,
life,
more often
chat.
than not,
He's trying his
lightens up
best,
the
but the
mood of whatever
horniness
it's
is
put
too
in.
real.
It will deflate the tension.
I
it
shall
will
not
overshadow
succumb
the
to your
seriousness.
wicked
It will,
ways.
if done incorrectly,
Be gone,
clash
thought.
with any serious tone you're going for. You can certainly put fan service like Fire Forces into comedic scenes.
Can
because
I
sex
handle the
jokes work
horny,
very well.
literally?
You can put it into lighthearted scenes because it adds levity, but there are just some types
One
of
more
scenes
game.
that fan
One
service
more
like
game.
this should not be a part of. And the
Being
worst
stuck
fan
in a
service
loop.
elements in anime, the ones that turn people against it entirely, are when it's put into those types of scenes anyway. You'll have a dramatic or serious conversation punctuated by a middle school titty joke. It just isn't given the same level of maturity as the rest of the elements in the show, because to a lot of people, including its creators, fan service is still childish and immature.
He trained
by its
and still
very
got
nature.
beat, literally.
Discussing the history and definition of the term, we know that fan service isn't added to a show for the same reason that the other elements are. It's to excite 15-year-old boys. It's to please the audience. It's to service the fans. So it's almost always put in with way less thought than any other element of
I
the
didn't
show.
know they
And
turned
that
us
just
into a
doesn't
character
work.
in Fire
Again,
Force.
I have no problem with Tamaki versus
His
Assault
face,
because
though.
the whole premise is absurd. And I wouldn't have a problem with Tamaki's weird cat cry if they hadn't chose to be immature at a serious moment. Just keep her in her regular outfit, which is already very fan servicey. It just blends in better because it has reason to exist. Going off of that, you can have entire shows crammed full of fan service that are still done well because they know how to use it. Just look at Food Wars for an example of this.
Oh yeah, Food Wars.
Food Wars is
We're
a
watching
cooking
that
show.
together.
The entire
We're
plot
watching
is
that
a
one
kid
together.
who's
That's
good at
gonna be an
cooking
event
goes to enter a
next week.
competition to
Next
be the
week.
best cook.
We're gonna do
Standard
that.
anime
We're gonna
plot.
watch that
Pretty
next
much
week.
just a shonen story, but with cooking battles instead of anime fights. But the entire appeal of the show is its fan service, because every time someone eats a good dish in Food Wars, well, this happens.
They go.
That happens every time. The food in this show gives people orgasms. That's just how it works.
Food
Is that a stupid
orgasm.
premise? Yes. Is this show basically a hentai without the nudity? Also yes. But it isn't hiding any of that. Food Wars doesn't hide much of anything, actually. Food Wars wears its fan service on its sleeve. It is very open about being so sexual. And because it's a comedy, using busty women and ripped dudes
Whoa!
in unexpected situations just blends
He's
right in
ripped!
seamlessly. The show uses every opportunity to make sex jokes or horny food scenes or ridiculous
Honestly, the
moments
food
driven
in there
by hentai
definitely
logic.
always
And it
makes me
will
very
get
hungry.
Every character naked to
Oh.
achieve this.
Oh.
Girls have food orgasms. Guys have food orgasms. The
Uh-huh.
main character has food orgasms. Old men have food orgasms. The mechanic is treated entirely equally,
So
which makes it even funnier when
good.
it happens to someone
Yummy.
unexpected, not just all the hot girls. This equality also dissuades any idea that any specific character just exists for their sexiness. When every character
Love
in the
it.
show is sexualized,
Food.
then none of them have to
The food
exist
looks so
purely
fucking
for eye
good.
candy.
Exactly.
They can all be functioning characters because the show has no shortage of characters to draw horniness out of. And to top it off, the food orgasms even serve the plot, surprisingly enough. Because with an animated show about food, it can be very hard to show the audience how something might taste. We can see the delicious food, but how
Pork
can we know what
roast.
it's like
Ooh.
to eat? Well, how about showing the person eating it nutting their brains out and describing the food like it's sex? That's not only a very convincing way to relay how good it is
You're
to the
right.
audience,
I get
but also
really
a
hungry
built-in
whenever
set
the
piece in
food
the
comes
same
out
way
because
that
I'm just
special
like so
moves in shonen
interested. I'm
fights
like,
are. It's an excuse to
I
go
do
over the
learn-
top
oh my
and
God.
add excitement and crazy animation to something that in real life isn't that interesting to watch. And so even though Food Wars has way more fan service than a show like Fire Force could even dream of, none of it ever comes across negative like it does with Tamaki, because it's tonally consistent with the whole show, because the whole show doesn't take itself that seriously.
Yeah.
Food Wars is one of the few shows that can achieve this sacred title of good fan service, almost entirely because it understands how to blend it in and make it work for the show. It isn't just a cooking show with nudity slapped in, the fan service is a critical element. And so before we wrap up this discussion of fan service, I want to cover just one more show, because it would be a disservice to the entire video to not cover it. But before I do, let's jump back into the history of Gainax, because I didn't quite finish telling the story. With the release of Neon Genesis Evangelion, which went on to be one of the biggest anime properties of all time, you would think Gainax would be doing great. And they were, if only for a short while. It was only 2 years after the release of this massively successful show, however, that Gainax would start to fall, as it had been revealed that the company had concealed 1.56 billion yen in revenue from Evangelion that they had failed to pay taxes on. Being audited by Japan's National Tax Agency, the president, Takeshi Sawamura, and his accountant were both arrested and sent to jail in July of 1999 for accounting fraud. In light of this, one of the studio's founding members, Yasuhiro Takeda, had this to say: "I don't think he purposefully set out with the goal of evading taxes. It was more that our level of accounting knowledge wasn't up to the task of dealing with revenues on such a large scale."
Damn.
And all of this is very serious stuff, but that quote is kind of funny, you gotta admit. Like, I don't know, maybe don't run a major company if you just kind of forget how to do taxes sometimes. Maybe hire an accountant with the millions of dollars you are hoarding. Just a thought. But that's not even where it ends.
I mean,
From
that's
2000
true.
To 2016,
That's
Gainax
true.
would
He's
face a whole
yeah,
heap
he's
of
speaking
lawsuits,
facts on that
including
one.
breach of contract and failure to pay 100 million in yen in royalties to Hideaki Anno after he formed another studio in 2006. Then in 2016, Gainax's headquarters moved and were reportedly being run out of a 45-year-old 2-bedroom apartment in Tokyo. I swear I'm not making that up, though it is very hard to find verifiable sources for that information. And the darkest part of all, in 2018,
Remember,
Gainax's
children,
new
do
president,
your
Tomohiro Maki,
taxes.
was sentenced to 3
Do
years
your
in jail
taxes,
for
or else you're
indecent
going to be
acts.
kicked by the
now,
butt.
I won't ruin this
And
anime
you don't
titty
want
video by
that.
talking about what he did. You can look that up for yourself. It's pretty bad. But somewhat fortunately, a ray of sunshine was starting to form over the dumpster fire that Gainax turned into. And that ray of sunshine is
It's
Studio Trigger.
me! I'm the ray of sunshine! I make the best sun die! Just
And
kidding.
also Kara, Hideaki Anno's new studio, but this is a video about anime boobs, not Evangelion.
I'm gonna explode into a supernova!
Trigger was founded in
Kill la Kill.
2011
I
by
love Kill
former
la Kill.
Gainax employees Hiroyuki Imaishi and Masahiko Utsuka following their success on Gurren Lagann in 2007. And coming from
Logan?
a show about
I thought it was
teenagers trying to
Logan.
fight God with mech robots
Go
and the power
around
of friendship,
Logan?
trigger
Go around
card-breaker
Logan?
personality
Man,
from
I don't know,
over-the-top
but I do like
ridiculous
that.
shows. The first of
Believe
which
in the me
being
that
Kill la
believes in
Kill.
you. Gurren Lagann?
Kill la Kill is the
Lagann?
fan service show. That's the only way I can describe it. Over half a century of jiggling titties and panty shots have all led up to
I
this
love the
one
art style
show.
for that one,
Kill
though.
la Kill is a shonen story following our female protagonist
Lagann?
Ryuko Matoi
Lagann?
as she searches for her father's killer by enrolling in the
Lagann.
prestigious and militaristic
Awesome.
Hinoji Academy.
No one ever
The
corrected
school's
me
leader
until
is the
now.
fearsome
See,
Satsuki
that's how
Kiryuin.
I know you guys actually care and love me.
Kiryuin. The school's leader is the fearsome Satsuki Kiryuin, who Ryuko challenges in order to learn the
I
truth.
challenge you,
This
bitch.
leads to various members of the school getting in Ryuko's way, who she must defeat to work her way up to finally confronting Satsuki. And all of this is typical shonen. The plot on its surface level is not any different to your typical male-centric battle shows.
I'm gonna have
what
some little
separates Kill la
snackies.
Kill is everything other than that surface-level plot. The way that powers work in Kill la Kill is entirely based on clothing. People have things called life fibers sewn into their outfits that give the wearer superhuman abilities. And Ryuko finds a special sentient piece of life fiber clothing called a kamui that gives her shonen protagonist level strength when she goes through a transformation from an ordinary schoolgirl into this.
Yummy! Look at those thighs!
Now, this is a lot. It's a magical girl transformation, very similar to Cutie Honey from back in 1973. And just like Cutie Honey, the magical girl genre that previously existed in shows for girls is being brought into a
Kill
show
la kill!
with
Kill
much
la kill!
more nudity.
Woo!
Much more nudity. And that's the point.
Hello,
Because a lot of people,
thank you
when
so
they
much
first
for
see Ryuko's
following.
transformation, or Satsuki's transformation, since she has similar powers, are immediately taken aback by how ridiculous it all is. These are teenage girls. They're fighting in outfits that make lingerie look like a burqa in the most ridiculous, over-the-top battle sequences that show off every part of their body that the animators
Family
can
bonding
think of.
time.
This must obviously be a show for horny men and nothing more than that. Except it is more than that. Kill la Kill is purposefully overloading the sexualization. Even outside of the main character's outfits, you've got constant sex jokes and ridiculous camera angles.
Hot
and
girls
an entire
fighting,
faction
sign me
of
up.
people that are literal nudists. It is
Nudists.
blatantly insane. But even more than, say, Food Wars, which uses the fan service as part of the plot, Kill la Kill is a plot about fan service. It's literally about all this. This
Nudist
sexualization is the main story. The powers in Kill la Kill all revolve around clothing, and the way in which the main character overcomes other people's powerful clothes is by
Yeah.
fighting in basically the nude in her kamui. She's initially forced into wearing it because it's sentient and attaches to her against her will. Throughout the show, however, she bonds with it and starts using it of her own volition. She becomes empowered by it.
I need to get
The main
naked.
villain, on the other hand, wants everyone to wear specific clothing as a form of control. This clothing is the tool in which they exert their power over others by giving them abilities through the life fibers, but also taking away their free will. And the main faction of people fighting this oppression are literal nudists. They shun the clothes and their oppression, instead becoming empowered by their lack of clothing. And if any of this isn't coming together yet, the title of the show, Kill la Kill, comes from Japanese wordplay on how the words for wearing clothes and killing someone are pronounced the same. Kill la Kill literally translates to dressed to kill. Going even more in depth, Kill la Kill's protagonist is a young schoolgirl. Her kamui normally takes the form of a sarafuku, a traditional Japanese school uniform that represents female youth. And she can only transform into her empowered, sexualized form with a sacrifice of some of her blood.
I'll give you my
Ryuko
blood.
And Satsuki literally bleed in order to transform into sexy, mature versions of themselves. If you don't think that's an obvious metaphor for puberty and womanhood, I don't think we're watching the same show. And going even more in depth, you can talk about the show's use of fan service.
But-
The show is painfully aware of how fan service can take power away from characters and uses that as part of the story. The fan service isn't meant to take away their power. They are wearing these outfits purposefully. They are aware of their sexualization and draw power through it. And anytime the women are sexualized without their consent, it is very clearly used as a tool against them. It is meant to shame them, and they're meant to overcome that.
I mean, I would be embarrassed. Oh my god. Whoa!
Whereas again, going back to Fire
I
Force,
like that little
every element
transition
of
he
fan
did.
service with Tamaki is against her will. It is constantly being used against her, and as such, severely undermines her character. In Kill la Kill, there is no attempt to use the fan service to reduce the female characters to sex objects. And
I
the
shall be
show
a
is very
strong
careful
woman
in
with
making
big
you
boobs
aware of that.
and a six
So
pack.
the whole of Kill la Kill, even further than being about clothing, is a show about female empowerment.
Hell
It's
yeah.
about young girls becoming women and choosing to take power from their sexualization instead of letting it control them. And it's a show about fan service. It's a satire of
This
the entire
person
trope
really
and
did a
story
good job
about
on
its
this.
use in
I
media.
really
Trigger
love
is
the
very
detail.
explicitly questioning the audience's motivation for watching lewd scenes. It's pointing the spotlight
Hi,
at you to
Kono.
ask
Welcome
you
back,
why
honey.
you enjoy this. It's fun
Yeah,
to
Kill la
watch
Kill is
Satsuki
such a
fight in
great
her
anime when
ridiculous
you realize
outfit,
the message
and yet when
behind
she's
the
getting
fan
sexually
service.
assaulted by her mother, suddenly all the nudity isn't that appealing. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than the fact that every time
I
Ryoko
remember that scene.
transforms
I
or
was
does
like,
something
ah!
weird, there's a giant crowd of men cheering it on and getting nosebleeds. That's supposed to be you, motherfucker. They're making fun of you. All of Kill la Kill uses fan service not just as a plot device or set dressing, but as a storytelling method. Because without the prominence of fan service in anime and pop culture, you couldn't have a story that's so expertly told using it. And without knowing some of the history of fan service like I've covered, I don't really think you could appreciate it in Kill la Kill. Because the plot is actually part of the plot.
Yeah.
So for anyone
No, I
interested
knew
in
that
deeper
one.
discussion of the show and its use of fan service, I'd highly recommend this 4-part video series on Kill la Kill by Study of Swords. It goes into a lot more depth than I could, so I'll link it in the description. So with this video, I think I've looked at every possible angle I could cover fan service in anime from. We've looked at its history, where it came from, and why it's so popular. And we've seen some bad and great examples to help us understand if it can be used well or not. And hopefully this all highlights the complexity of the topic.
Yeah.
Fan service might just be boobs and butts and horny manga authors on the surface, but it can be so much more than that. And like any element in a piece of media, its inclusion and how it's used are very important. Because there are a lot of shows that do not use fan service well at all. They have characters that just exist to get the audience horny, or awful intrusive bits that deflate the whole scene.
Fairy
Pandering
tale!
beach episodes, or
I know that
characters
one.
getting perved on, or a girl slipping and falling pussy first onto the main character's face.
I don't know
or
how
just
that
characters
happens,
that
but
are
I guess it
clearly
happens,
not
you know?
adults getting sexualized. Like, I am of the firm belief that you should just mentally increase the age of any anime character by like
Please.
3 years because it'll make the show better. Ain't no way that Okabe, this scruffy looking college dude, is meant to be 18. This man is clearly like 25.
He
But
looks
hey,
like he's in his
sometimes these
30s,
are
but
just
I
children
love
we're
that
showing you.
anime.
That is
I
a
love that
fucking
anime.
child. I don't care if
I
age
love
is just
that
a number.
anime.
That number is 911. You should be in fucking prison.
911. 911.
I don't think fan service will ever go away. And I think
Yeah,
instead
no.
of people complaining
It's gonna be
online
here.
about this has
It's
too
literally
much,
gonna
or
be
this
here.
show is ruined because of it, we should instead ask ourselves, how could it be done better? It's fine to include adult content and sexuality.
I
You
think
just
like
have
a
to
good
include
fan
it in
service,
good
but not
way.
a fan
You know,
service would
make
be
sure the fan service
the
fits
Spy
the story
Family.
and its characters.
Like,
if you want to be lighthearted,
it's there
add all the sex jokes and
a
pervy
little,
moments you want. But if you want to,
and
be
I feel like
serious
it's
and
done
dark,
right
get the
too,
boob
because like
jokes
it
fuck
gets the
away
plot
from there.
done pretty well.
Or just make the
That's
whole
just me.
tone
I
of
don't
the
know.
show adult, so
I'm
no
just talking out of
single
my ass.
character feels like their inclusion is just for eye candy.
Also, thank you so
Include
much for
adult
following.
themes
Mwah.
and nudity into the plot, or include it in the storytelling in some way. If you're already gonna show me bouncing boobs, you can at least make them feel not out of place. I don't want the show feeling like it's made for 12-year-olds up until the moment you show me softcore porn. Nobody was about to recommend interspecies reviewers before they saw a titty. What that tells me is that the fan
I've
service
seen
doesn't
that
fit.
one.
It feels out of place in the show. You've got to match the level of maturity,
hiccups.
or else don't consider putting the fan service in there in the first place. And I think on the other side of this, a lot of people in the anime community need to stop being so immature when it comes to this stuff. It can be pretty insane the amount of mental gymnastics people pull to try and convince themselves
honestly, I
that
always go
titties
back
and
to
television are
High School
inherently
DxD
shameful.
because
This
yeah,
anime
sure, it
is
has
trash,
lovely
and so
plot,
am I
but it
argument
has
people make
plot.
to try and infer that every show with nudity in it is dumb male pandering is awful. I hate it. Because no, just the process of showing skin does not preclude an anime from being good or enjoyable for other reasons or even intellectual. It just means that
Interspecies
it
reviewers
showed
is
skin.
funny. Honestly,
That's
yeah.
it. A show can be thoughtful and engaging and full of deeper meaning and also show nudity, and those two elements can exist.
I've never seen
entirely
Game of
separate from one
Thrones.
another. I think the anime community really
There's
needs
no
to look
plot.
into fan service
There's
if we
plot.
want shows to improve. Because the
There's
main
so
thing I
much
see
plot,
holding it back
Trey.
right
You
now
know, we
is the
should watch it
collective
together. I'll force you
immaturity
to watch
that
it
we
with
have
me,
towards
okay?
it. People
watch it
on
together.
both the creators and the viewer side still treat nudity and sexual content with way less thought than it deserves, which leads to these elements never being able to be explored or expanded on fully more than the childish ways they're used in shows like Fire Force. All fan service and sexuality and nudity are, at the end of the day, are elements to a story.
Hello, thank
And
you so
like
much for
every
following.
other element, you can use them better and make them more enjoyable. You can fit them in and give them importance, and you can make them a positive part of the experience, not an inherently negative one. You just have to put some thought into it.
Hello.
So instead of
Thank you so
turning
much for
away
following.
shows just because they have fan service, think of how easily we could be recommending them because they have good fan service. I mean, who doesn't like anime boobs?
Ah, lovely. That was a very informative video.